Hi, welcome to the Leadership Pathway podcast. I'm Sean Badir, sitting here with Dave and Kristen Miller, the co-founders.
Yes, you are.
Hey. And Andy Salonen.
Is it
Andy.
Salonen or Salonen? It's.
You spelled it wrong in the email.
Did I? Well,
Yeah,
It's
there you
okay.
go.
See.
It's all right.
All
Salonen.
Salonen.
Andy, good to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Andy, you are a licensed professional counselor.
Yes.
You've got a variety of valuable experience, both with young college students, with the county that you work in. You work for Mental Health Partners,
Yeah, up in Boulder County.
which is a massive organization, helping lots of people all around Boulder County deal with all sorts of issues. I know you have expertise and credentials in addiction counseling. You've seen a lot of stuff, and what we're talking to today, I know this is a topic we're not, there's no way we could talk about everything in mental health. So what I want us to focus on is just around, our work with young leaders. We place young people in these residencies at churches all around the country. Usually they're moving somewhere new, and so we see just a lot of stuff in the first 6 months. A lot of stuff. Just from your experience with young people right now, what are some of the things that you've seen? What are some of the things that you're learning about what young people are going through?
Yeah, so I actually found this really interesting, and I think it's indirectly connected to mental health, but we're seeing a huge decrease in the amount of teens and young people working. So when they're 17, 18 years old, there's like 20% less of them than our generation, or Sean and I, millennials, working. So I think that's something to be mindful, right? They're coming to the church, a residency, that might be their first professional interaction, or with that type of environment. And so that can lead to uncertainty, anxiety, stress. And then, Sean, you said being away from home, right? They've moved. So they're unfamiliar with this new environment. I think some of the stressors we're seeing with this generation, you think about the year that they were brought into the world, right? So after 97 through 2012 maybe. You think post 9/11, right? Recession, lots of gun violence, mass shootings, unrest among social injustice, racial, cultural issues. So those are just some of the stressors, right?
Yeah.
And then you had COVID in there, and climate change. And these are things that this generation really cares about. And so I wonder how we're talking about that as leaders, and how we're validating some of those stressors and concerns.
Yeah, that's good. And I think a lot of young leaders are, I love that they're open and honest about struggles with mental health, that it's coming to the forefront, something that is, probably always been there, but now we pay more attention to it because it's more vocalized. And how have you seen older generations? Because a lot of times when we're placing residents, it's somebody who's a Gen Xer or a boomer that's working with a young person. How would you advise someone like that as they step in with a young leader who's struggling with mental health issues, or how should they be preparing themselves before that person arrives?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we consider Gen Z as, you'll hear it's the most depressed generation, or the most isolated or loneliest. And so I think we can look for some of those red flags, right, as leaders. Man, are they showing up to work on time? Have they become isolated? Are they still hanging out with people? Are they taking care of themselves? So personal hygiene, things like that. Irritability is a huge one for, that 18 to 25 range. They don't know how to express themselves. And so, we say anger, outbursts, irritability. I think validating that as a leader is important. I think we all want to be heard, right? And making space for it. So there's some of the preventative stuff we can do right ahead of time, giving them time off, right? Just working that into benefits as a resident, and knowing that you're going to have 5 days a year for mental health, and you take it whenever and that's on paper, but then I also support it when you actually take it, and we encourage it. That's really important. And then I think just a willingness to have the conversation, right, and name it for what it is. So yeah, you are having suicidal thoughts or ideation. Let's talk about it using that language and naming it.
So here's a scenario. So there's 5 to 8 people on a team. The youngest one is 35. And these people all graduated from the School of Hard Knocks. So either they were naturally just their Enneagram and their daddy issues and their grit and all the stuff that made them just power through, right? And they're going to, the lead guy's 60, the next youngest person is 30, and now they're, and you say to these people, so you got to get ready for this. And they're like, yeah, we got it. And then we get there. Right. We're 60 days in, and things blow up, and this has happened.
Yeah, like instead of giving a resident more time, he or she is leaving the office at 2:30, and we're just kind of looking bewildered and thinking, okay, and not having the conversation of why is it you need to leave.
But they've never had to do it yet. These organizations, some of them. How do they prepare? When you say, well, they gotta I forget the word you used. You gotta honor it. You gotta be ready for it.
Validate it. Yeah.
Actually give them the time off. Yeah.
Have the conversations.
How do we get ready? Because I think every pastor wants their church to be younger. Every pastor wants to, reach the next generation, which is now even the next generation. Mm-hmm. We haven't reached that other generation yet. We're reaching the next one. Do you know what I mean? I think every pastor desires it. They're like, well, but they didn't have this. No one helped them, but they somehow got there. They just don't. It feels like a communication.
Hard to connect those dots.
What are the 3 things you'd say to this pastor that just is trusting Leadership Pathway to find them the 22-year-old?
And you guys are very trustworthy people.
Thank you.
You better read what? You better...
So one, gosh, go get some counseling yourself and see what that's like for you. And then be willing to maybe talk about that. Not in a detailed way, but I actually tried this and this is what it was like for me. The other thing is sharing that with people, so with your team, being vulnerable with that. I think the other thing people can do to prepare is, I'm trying to think of something to read, but I think just knowing this population, right? So I got online and just better understanding what this generation's dealing with.
Do they have a choice to do this? If you're going to open the doors to 22-year-old, 20-year-old, 24-year-old, it's almost like you were saying, I think 5 years ago we would have been a little lighter on this topic. And today we're like, no, you don't have a choice. You have to get ready for this.
Yeah, I don't think so, because this generation has options, right? Yep. They're very well connected. Yep. They're the first generation that they probably don't even remember what it's like to not have a screen or to not have access to technology. So they'll find something else.
Exactly.
And they're also willing to talk about it. Yep. And so they're going to be transparent.
Mm-hmm. That's what's been refreshing from my perspective.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And we can learn a lot from that because we're not as transparent.
So you asked about 3 things, and maybe that's the third thing, ask them.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the process is coming in for a new resident, but and we can't get into, I don't ask people about their health or their mental health in the interview process, but what can I learn from you? Mm-hmm. Leaving it open-ended, and they have a lot to learn from leadership. What can you learn from them?
That's good.
That's good.
Okay, so mental health, we don't look at this the same now than we did even 5 years ago. What do you hope the church looks like on this in the next 5 around mental health?
I think, just to have a more open conversation around it. So that might be from the weekend, from the stage, right? It might be stuff like this, right? Can we put a podcast together, or something that people will listen to, that really represents us as a community, but says, I care about this and it's important that we have the conversation, right? And I'm going to go do that. I hope too that the church can be okay with referring out, right? I think there's a tendency to say, I have to take this on all myself, and we have to help all these people. And that is part of the role of the church. But when we aren't equipped or we don't know, it's okay to say that and to say, well, here's my list of 10 referrals in the community, and this is where I'm going to point you so that you can get the support you need.
So I think one of the things that we've seen a few times is by the time the church comes around, it's like the volunteer fire department that shows up, and you might as well just get the marshmallows. The house is on fire, right? Because we're not going to save this thing. So by the time we get on it, by the time they get referred out, it feels like we're late, and now we've got 6 months of disruption into this person's life. And how can a staff, or what should a staff or leaders be doing to get more ahead of it? On entry, maybe, during onboarding even, in the first 30, 60 days of these residencies.
Yeah, and I'm going to toss a word out there that I think we maybe overly use, self-care. We talk about it a lot, and I wonder if that's something that we're checking in on with residents. And this is basic stuff, right? Like, so what do you do for physical exercise? Yep. What's your sleep pattern like? Yep. When do you eat? And are you interacting with other people outside of this staff? You're new here. How can I help you get engaged in a community where you feel like you belong, versus like, I'm just here to work?
So if I'm 38 years old and I just had that meeting with my 22-year-old resident, and all of the signs are awful, and as we know, they're probably telling you about a third of the truth, because that's what I'd be doing. I wouldn't be completely.
So you have to assume it's worse.
I assume it's worse than what they're hearing. So they just left my office, and I'm like, so they've put on 10 pounds. They're struggling sleeping. He's sitting there fidgeting, picking at his hands. Got all the classic signs of all. What do I do? There's not a counselor on my staff. I don't have a pastoral counselor down the hall for me, my staff. We don't have that yet. What am I doing?
I think that's where you get them connected with somebody else, whether that is an outside therapist. It doesn't have to be a therapist, though. Maybe it's a support group. Maybe it's a meetup group in the community. Again, I think that goes a long ways. If it's before you've hired them on, I wonder if it's okay to say, gosh, you are a great candidate, and I want to meet in a year and see how things are going.
Sure.
And here's what I saw.
Yeah.
And these are red flags for me.
Yeah. That's good.
I wonder if they might appreciate that more.
Interesting.
From you, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
What's the first soft skill in the book? I'm looking at the guidebooks.
The first soft skill is self-care.
Self-care.
It most definitely is.
The first thing we talk about.
Yeah. Which ties into community. Like we talk about, if you want them to work at your church, that church needs to feel like their church, and they need to feel welcomed and in tune with people, and certainly holistically healthy. Yeah.
Also help them get engaged with some sort of serving opportunity, not necessarily in the church, but they want to feel like they have purpose, right?
Yeah.
And meaning.
Sure.
That's important as they establish this identity.
Yeah.
So where am I going to serve in the community? How do I make myself useful?
Yeah, that's good.
The first 6 months we call the danger zone, because it almost always flares up, it feels like, with candidates. So this is great.
That's happening too, now that you've done this for a while. So have that conversation early on and say, this is what we've seen.
Yeah.
What's the likelihood that this could happen, and how do we talk about it now?
Yeah.
This is good, man. Thank you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks. It's nice to be here. Thanks, everyone.